Apes together strong. War for the Planet of the Apes. I'm probably going to end up getting into spoilers pretty quick, so let me get my spoiler-free version of this review out right at the top here. Short version, spoiler-free. It is good. It is very good. It is a great conclusion to this trilogy of films that was Rise, Dawn, and now War. And it wraps everything up really well. Andy Serkis is amazing. Visually, it is stunning. The character work is great. Personally speaking, I think I like Dawn a little bit better. Part of that has to do with preferences in terms of tone. And the one thing that I will caution people going in is the marketing has been kind of misselling this. And I think the title does as well. Because both the name and the marketing, War for the Planet of the Apes, implies a much more visceral kind of action film than this is actually delivering. Not to say that there isn't some of that stuff in there. There is, and I'll talk more about that as I get into the spoiler end of things. But it does not make up the bulk or the majority of the film. So know what you're getting into. It is a bit slower than the marketing is selling it as. So adjust your expectations based on that, but it is very, very good. There's your spoiler free. Let's get right into it. First off, man, I love this trilogy. I mean, I love this trilogy. I loved Rise when it came out. It knocked me, just completely bowled me over. I didn't see it coming. Dawn just took me places. I'm like, how can a narrative be this smart in terms of where it's going and be sidestepping so many obvious landmines? And this last one, I had a few moments like that as well, but because it does have to bring more or less some kind of conclusion to things, it's not quite as unpredictable on point-for-point things as Dawn of the Planet of the Apes was. So that's part of why I like Dawn a little bit better. The other thing that I mentioned is tone, which is that the tone of Dawn had a little bit more hope running through it. Now, ultimately, that hope didn't pan out because what you're hoping for is peace between the humans and the apes, and ultimately, that's not what the film delivers in the end, but there is still that thread of hope running through the film. This one, it's not about, like, the only thing you're hoping for is just survival. Forget peace. And I think that's one of the things, because it opens 2 years later, and I think I had assumed, and I think a lot of folks had assumed, that it was going to open right after the end of Dawn, because that's when the military first showed up. But instead, they jump ahead 2 years, and I think the reason to do that is they need to skip past the point where you would be thinking, oh, how's the first encounter going to go? Is the military going to treat them as hostile? Is there still hope for working this out? No. It's 2 years later, fighting is full on, and we're going to open with a scene that makes it incredibly clear war is on, and who it is you are supposed to be siding with. Because the other thing with Dawn was, it was a bit more, look, the humans are in this situation, so you understand where they're coming from. The apes are in this situation, you understand where they're coming from. This is a case where it's a bit more black and white. Very firmly, you are supposed to be on the ape side in this conflict, and honestly, you are. The humans are not particularly sympathetic, although in terms of talking about Woody Harrelson basically is it. There's like one other human that gets highlighted and has some moments, and that's nice, but basically everything is funneled through Woody Harrelson specifically, because all the other characters are just soldiers, and they're sort of taken, you've seen them all, these guys are following the command of this guy, so this guy's kind of the only one who matters. So in terms of Woody Harrelson's portrayal, I think Woody Harrelson always does a good job. I can't remember ever seeing him turn in a bad performance, and he does bring some layer, he gets some moments to add some depth to it, but he is very clearly the villain of this piece. I suppose in a way that Koba was in the previous one, but I feel like you got more of an understanding of Koba than we get of this guy, just relative to each other. And I think they might have pushed him into out-and-out villainy a little bit too far, although I'm not sure if I actually mean that. Functionally, I think it was probably the smart thing to do, but I like, there was a moment during basically his sort of, here's my background and here's my philosophy rantish thing. It was the point where he's like, this is a holy war, and implying that he's come up with this bizarre, almost religious basis for what he's doing, and that, I don't know, that struck me as a step too far, and I have a hard time specifically articulating why, but it just seemed like one step too many. It's like, look, he can be just fundamental on the basis of human survival is paramount over all things. It doesn't have to cross over into like this borderline religious fanaticism. I don't think, because the thing was, they didn't do anything with that. I'm not saying that there's no grounds to have that as part of the character, but it felt like it was just there. And like, look how crazy he is because he believes that he is on a holy mission to exterminate the apes. I'm like, yeah, but why? It went somewhere that it didn't actually have anything that it was going to do with that. But that aside, his performance is very good. He is definitely the villain of this piece, but the star, unquestionably, of the whole franchise, and this film specifically, is, without a doubt, Caesar Andy Serkis. Holy crap. Okay, first of all, the apes look amazing. I mean, every time one of these has come out, I have said or thought, the apes look amazing. And every new movie, they look better. It's crazy how good these apes look. But, that's kind of a given. Technology moves forward, the stuff gets better. But Andy Serkis gives such an amazing performance, and just doing so little. I mean, he speaks the most articulately that Caesar has ever spoken in this film, but that isn't what is amazing about the performance. Like, very early on, there's a moment where just another ape delivers to him just news he doesn't want to hear, and his only reaction is just this exhale. Like, it's not a big exaggerated physical thing, it's just... And I can't recreate it properly, but just everything about the body language, the pace, the tone of just an exhale tells you everything. It is so good. And all the other apes are great. Maurice was another standout. He was great. We got a new ape introduced, and this was interesting because this could have really gone off the rails. He just refers to himself as Bad Ape, and he's interesting for a lot of reasons, part of which are kind of intellectual and having to do with the franchise as a whole, and that is the idea that the virus that spread globally did impact other apes aside from Caesar's community. So it does mean that other apes, possibly around the entire world, are all as smart as Caesar and his family and his colony is. So that's a cool implication. And just the character of Bad Ape, and he's very much the inserted comedic relief character, and that can go really sour. But I think the movie kind of needed it, because like I said, this is a heavy movie. This thing is not messing around, and I think it needed that little bit of levity since it doesn't have the same strength of a hope narrative that the previous one had. So there's that, but in addition to that, he is legitimately funny, and Steve Zahn plays him, and plays him great. You just get so much, just again, from little things, just the way he says things, and the way he just a little look from him tells you so much about this guy, his history, and everything else. The other thing that could have been a real brick around the movie's neck is Nova, the young human girl. And again, in terms of the overall narrative of the thing, that was a cool thing to get layered in, which I wasn't expecting, because, people have said, this is actually a prequel to the original 60s Planet of the Apes, and I kind of have always approached that as, well, philosophically, that's a neat idea. I don't know how cleanly it's going to slot in, but they have you have to disregard the latter sequels to that film, because they come up with their own origin for how the apes got smart and everything else. So you need to disregard all that. But if you're looking at just that original with Charlton Heston in it, then this is surprisingly lining up with everything well. And with Nova, they cover the idea of why humans in that film, in that future, are mute and don't speak, which wasn't something I was expecting to be addressed. It wasn't like, oh boy, I hope they filled in that plot hole, but I love that they came up with a way that felt organic to do it. And yet have recalled Nova, which is a wonderful nod to the original. There were a lot of very cool little nods. Nova was one. The crosses that they hang they're not really crosses, they're X's, but the things that they hang the apes of were basically the same ratings as the scarecrows from the beginning of the Planet of the Apes movie. And there were just these great, wonderful visual or dialogue nods to the original film, because I do love the original Planet of the Apes. I love it a lot. I don't want to compare it to these because I think they're, just the style of filmmaking and acting and everything else is very different. This movie really does a number of things that I think, under other circumstances or in the hands of another filmmaker, could have sent the thing off the rails. I already mentioned the insertion of a comic relief character. Another thing is killing Caesar's son. So, like, to make a comparison, pretty much my overriding, this is why I have a hard time even sitting down to give it another shot, problem with something like, say, Alien 3, is that it opens with the death of Newt. Now, the reason that's a problem is that it completely negates the entire climax of Aliens, which is not only a better film, but the entire confrontation with the alien queen in that film is sparked by Ripley trying to save Newt. So to open the next film with, and she died anyway, so all that was pointless, really did and always will rub me the wrong way. And that could have happened here with the death of Caesar's oldest son, but it doesn't. And I think it's because in this case, again, comparing to Alien 3, and I'm sure there's other examples, it's just my go-to comparison, but to compare it again, in Alien 3, it was, we are getting these characters out, we are dismissing them because we don't want to use them, which feels disrespectful and just wasteful. In this film, in War for the Planet of the Apes, the death of Caesar's son drives the narrative. It drives Caesar's decisions and what he does. So yes, is it possible that it's negating some of what he achieved in the last film? Yes, but then there are immediate consequences to that, and it drives his choices, which therefore drive the narrative. So it is respectful of the decision to kill off the characters as opposed to just doing it haphazardly or dismissively, which is what Alien 3 felt like. I think the only one real notable criticism I feel I can level against it, that isn't a matter of taste, because the thing I mentioned with Woody Harrelson, that's kind of a bit of a matter of taste. The thing about it not having as strong a thread of hope, that's a personal taste. I can't say that makes the movie worse, just makes it a little bit less to my liking. I think there's probably about 10 minutes that could have stood to be cut out of Act 2. The period in which just the apes are captured. And that whole section in there, I feel like there's about 10 minutes, not like whole to be lifted, but just trimming down bits of that to remove about 10 minutes of it, I think would have streamlined it, because it felt like we spent a little bit too much time there, which I suppose you could argue makes it all the more triumphant when they get out of there, because you're like, oh, finally they're out. But for me, it came close to, I didn't check my watch, but I got borderline just during that part. But it was brief. That was a brief little, how much longer are we going to be in this place kind of thing. But this movie is one of the best trilogy conclusions in recent memory that I can throw out there. It is a wonderful conclusion to the personal journey of Caesar as a character. It is a wonderful conclusion for this trilogy of films, completing an arc, setting up that original 60s film. This is just really great work. And this is another great film. There have been a surprising number of really good films this summer. Usually with the summer, I expect to get one really good film and a bunch of pretty good films. Yeah, that was pretty good, or that was fun, or that was this, or that was that. We've had some really good stuff, and that's nice. That's always nice when it can happen. So that's pretty much my thoughts on War for the Planet of the Apes. Not perfect. I still think Dawn is a little bit better, but it's really good. And if you are a fan of this franchise, assuming that your expectations did not get put out of whack by the marketing, I think you're going to be really satisfied with this conclusion to this franchise. So, what are your thoughts on it? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check me out on Twitter at Council of Geeks. Give a listen to the Council of Geeks podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. And until next time, this council is adjourned.